I mean, the thing that I've said about libraries is that libraries are ideally positioned to help people over that hurdle, that next hurdle in their life, whatever the hurdle may be. And that has been the constant. I mean, ever since the very first time that I sat at a reference desk and helped people answer questions, and the question changes from time to time, the severity of the question, the content of the question obviously changes as our culture and society have changed, but the model and the pattern is the same. People have a need for information. When they have that information, they can get over that hurdle and get to the next important thing in their life. For the most part, from the Andrew Carnegie period, from sort of the birth of the public library in the middle of the 1800s until about the middle of the last century, about 1965 to 1970, if you went into a public library any time in that range, all about the same. I mean, no real big changes. But when you start seeing the digitization of information and how people could begin to retrieve information, that was a big change. And that was a huge change. One of the big changes that we had here at Mid-Continent was that it made information more available, more broadly available throughout our library system. So one thing it changed is that I personally became very invested in the idea of providing not just information within our library buildings, but outside of our library buildings. So remote access. And so what we did is we provided information to people via a digital platform so they could use that anytime, or they could use that information when the libraries were closed due to a snow day or something like that. I mean, place was no longer the determining factor in terms of receiving information. That was a big change. The other big change is that digital information takes very, very little space compared to physical information. How do you use that space in new ways? Well, you do things like you build dedicated programming space or small collaboration rooms or places where people can come together as third space. And that became a real guiding principle to our capital improvement plan. So really early in my career, as everything began to move from physical to digital, I kind of got to ride this wave that changed the entire landscape of what libraries were about, and constantly trying to figure out, it's obviously an opportunity, and how are you going to leverage that new opportunity to provide new services? Shortly after I started, and as I was working on several other projects to bring the internet to our libraries, and actually, as it turned out, Mid-Continent had the first website in the greater Kansas City area, the first library website in the greater Kansas City area. So that occurred from 95 to 98, but by that point, we had online databases at all of our branches. People could access the internet from all of our branches, and we were starting down this road to digital content, and really started thinking outside of the basics. What sort of service is it that the children today are going to want and that will be important for them as they become parents and grandparents? And that's when we started, finding, being a little bit more intentional about our story times, being a little bit more intentional about the live programming and in-person programming that we were doing. And then, of course, over the last 15 years, we've had things like our 50th anniversary celebration, the recognition from the IMLS as one of the IMLS medal winners for all the stuff that we'd done over the past 50 years. The Proposition L with the sort of vote of confidence and the vote of the people endorsing our vision for the future, as well as our reinvestment in our physical plant and our programs. And that's what we've been doing over the last handful of years. It was after I was the automation specialist that I decided, no, I think I'm going to pursue some additional management training. I got a master's in public administration at that point. And it was at that point that I kind of realized that whether it's running a library or running a not-for-profit or something, I could see that I want to be in a position where I can help run an institution that can help make the community it serves a better place. John and I were of an opinion that libraries are not a profit based organization. We're a mission-based organization, meaning that if you have more money, you should try to fulfill more mission. And so the idea is that you become more lean, you become more streamlined, you become more efficient, but you do so not to cut the budget, but to reallocate the budget, or to be able to do new and exciting things that will affect the community in better and more exciting and more useful ways. And that sort of became part of the idea of the purpose-based library, is trying to figure out, so what exactly is your community's need? What are the things in our communities that's keeping us from being able to do what it is that we need to do for our community to thrive and survive? Then you place a pin in it and you say, okay, now, what is the library appropriate response for the library to help us get to that community need? And inevitably, the answer is not going to be more books at that point. It's going to be things like, targeted programming to help us move the ball in this area, to help people understand the answer to these questions. And when we applied this for our most recent strategic plan, the thing that we kept focusing on was the fact that unless we are addressing things like basic literacy issues, then it doesn't make sense for us also as a library to be looking at things like individual enrichment and fulfillment and philanthropy and things like that. You've got to make sure that you're dealing with those most basic needs, so that to answer that question of, what is the ideal community, and then how can the library help you get there? Even if I can see the future and I think I know what the answers are, it'll be to a whole different set of questions. And if nothing else has proven that out, certainly no one could have guessed what we've just been through over the last several months as a community. But with that said, the one thing that I think that's very, very definite and very certain is that there's a role for the public library. The public library is going to be there to be able to provide that sort of critical information, those important resources that everyone needs, but not everyone can afford. My wife and I don't have children of our own, but one of the things that I've become very, very aware of is that in order to build the language skill that you need for the average child, you need a ton of books. You need a lot of books. And so where are you going to get those books? And even if it's not physical books, where are you going to get the licenses for the books that you're going to read on your iPad or your Kindle when you're talking about needing 20 or 30 books a month? How can the average person afford that? The average person cannot afford that. Again, this is an obvious role for a public library. And with us having the ability to provide $4 in service for every $1 in tax revenue that we generate, we can do this at a very, very, very cost-effective way. And so we're going to continue to find opportunities. And of course, we are at a point where we're 5 years into our Square One program, our small business program, but it's highly successful in allowing people to take control of their own destiny in terms of their own economic destiny. In terms of the Story Center, we're doing great things in terms of allowing people to tell their story, to have those tools to be able to interact. And so that ability to be able to figure out new library services around that, I don't know what the new programs are going to be, but we're going to keep our ear to the ground, and we're going to try to figure out what is it that the community needs, and then what is the library appropriate response.